Hi, everybody, and welcome to Stimming and Stilettos with Dr. Tasha. And of course, as duly noted and promised, we always have a great guest. We always have the best guest, and today is no different. We have Dr. Sybrina Atwater with us, and truth moment, it's like we've known each other or and about each other for a long time because we have mutual friends. And for some reason, we just, we can't seem to get it together. But today, the magic happened, and Dr. Atwater is here, and I'm so happy to have you here. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tasha. It is a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation and a chance to have a little bit of a conversation with the Stemming and Stilettos constituency. So glad to be here.
In full disclosure, I'm super excited. So my audience know when I get excited, like stuff happens, right? so I'm just really glad that we were actually able to make this happen. Like I said before, we run in the same circle, so we know some of the same people, and our people are good people.
Great people, right?
Great people. But as I start every show, and this again will be no different, Dr. Atwaters, please tell us your STEM story.
Ah, well, my STEM story, I imagine, probably started similar to most with great teachers in a public school setting. For me, it started around, I wouldn't say probably not until my second or third year, sophomore, junior year of high school. I went to an Atlanta public schools high school. I went to Murphy High School that became CREM. And, we were in the hood, let's be honest. I tell people I'm from the non-gentrified Kirkwood. But we had teachers who really cared, and the whole gifted track. You had teachers that once they were behind you, they were behind you. And it was those teachers, I think, that identified and helped cultivate both my passion and skills around science and math. And to be honest, math was my thing. I love math, right? And I've loved math since algebra. And so by the time we got to my junior, senior year, there was a math competition, and our teachers was good for putting us into these competitions, where I'll be honest, not too many people expected much from the Murphy High students. And
Mhm.
so they would send us to the debates with your Mays High, your Douglas High, and we come out winning. And so I won that and had the opportunity to compete at the state level. And I also began to just look more into what fields, junior year, you're thinking about, okay, what do I do? This high school journey is about to end. What fields I wanted to go into. And our Trig pre-calc teacher invited the Georgia Tech chapter of Society of Black Engineers out to give a talk. And I was leaning towards engineering more so kind of doubly because it's physics and math. And I tell people all the time, physics is my favorite science because it's probably more math based than a lot. So, there we are. And after they finished, though, I knew I wanted to go to Georgia Tech. But to be honest, my STEM career almost, took a different slightly turn because when I shared that with my counselors and a few others, you get that tech, as if that was an impossible feat for me. And I had a difficult conversation with my counselor, but a reassuring one with my mom. And my mom
Mm.
is someone of a strong faith, and she said very distinctly, that's where you want to go, that's where you apply, and that's where you'll go. And that was a bold statement from my mom, who at the time, to be honest, had just her car had just been repossessed.
Mhm.
She was staying in a home that was being renovated, and the construction workers probably shouldn't have let her stay there, but she had nowhere else to go. And I had full rides to two other schools. So going
Mhm.
to tech probably meant giving those up. But I think that type of boldness helped fuel me, and it was a great decision because I got to Georgia Tech surrounded by people who shared my passion for science and math and engineering, and there were a few nucleus, a cohort here that looked like me and from
Mhm.
similar backgrounds and was first gen like me. And, we showed up here. And it just became a role changing experience for me. I was able to do something like undergraduate research with a Dr. Gary May, who made that happen, right? Who's now chancellor at UC Davis, right? But then he was a new Black faculty member at Georgia Tech.
Right, right.
I got to meet Dr. Brian Blakes, who's now the first Black president of Georgia State, the Erica Mallets, who's executive director, right? These are people, Cedric Stallboys. I mean, it's just a list, right, of people that then we were just young people going after these passions and dreams that our family had not. But that was my transformative entryway. I interned with Motorola. I came into, I think, doubly at the right time because telecommunications was going to this wireless path. And so
Right.
I became an RF design engineer. And upon graduation, I got a job with Sprint Wireless up in Chicago. And as a native ATLian, you can know that was an experience. While it
Ooh.
was exciting, right?
Mhm.
Being, a young Black woman on a team, of people who really didn't look at like me and predominantly, men.
Right.
Uh, but it was great because, you quickly are subject matter experts at a time that wireless design was growing. And so it was exciting. I think within a year, I received a 15K bonus because, they were trying to keep these RF experts in wireless, right? I had a expense account. I traveled to Florida at least twice a week because my market was the Panhandle. So this was life that I just couldn't have dreamed of. And I think my STEM story leads me to that. Ultimately, I came back to Atlanta right at the right time in '96
Mhm.
with the Olympics, so able to be part of the Olympics
Oh.
working for Singular Wireless that became AT&T Wireless, that
Mhm.
whole full circle of that. And then ultimately back to grad school, where I began to combine passions, first getting my master's in instructional technology from Georgia State, which combined my passion for education and technology. And then moving forward, I have a master's from Emory in theological studies, and people often say, okay, how does that fit with your STEM story? But I was among, the first few who was doing religious practices in internet and virtual world spaces, right? So this
Ooh.
last year, as you can
Wow.
imagine, it's like, this work. But
Mhm.
looking into that, which ultimately led me back to Georgia Tech to get my PhD. And I don't think though anywhere in that journey I thought I would be where I landed in full circle now
Right.
of OMED, on the other side, teaching classes, uh, designing initiatives, influencing people who kind of like that young girl from Kirkwood who had no idea the breadth of where STEM would take me. So, and my family, right? And change my economic projections and all of that. So I say for me, my STEM story is so intertwined to my life story.
Yeah.
It changed it, it changed how I saw the world. It changed how I functioned in this world, right? It Yeah, so I guess my STEM story started 13 years ago, and it's maybe somewhat of a love affair, I would say.
I promise you, listen, I listened to your story and and knowing that we were probably at tech at around the same time. Because again, we know some of the same people. Um, I just it's like I relate to that because neither so my parents both had some school, some or they went to tech school or trade school for their degrees. My mom was a surge tech, my dad was a mechanic. And so and that was even after that was like after they started a career in this. So they were like, oh, now I need to go and get, you're telling me I have to go get this thing. So they were doing a thing before because this is what they did, right? You go, you found something you were qualified to do and you did it. And so I didn't know how I was going to I knew I was going to college or wanted to go to college. Um, I too had a counselor and teachers who were like, listen, you're too smart, you're too bright, you need to figure out what college you're going to, and we'll help you find the money. So I got into every other college that I applied to, except for I was waitlisted at Georgia Tech.
Interesting.
And I was like, I cried so hard when I got the letter, because now it's an email, but back in the day, you got a letter in the mail.
You got a letter.
Okay, you got a letter in the mail, and I cried so hard when I got that wait list letter, and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. And my mother was like, you have a full ride to the University of Alabama. You have a full ride to Wake Forest. You have, like these places, right? You have a full ride to FAMU. You have like, I had all of these things, but like Georgia Tech was the thing that I was like, I want to go to this school. I think I just know and knew that it would be life changing. And it was, because I finally got there. So they were like, well, okay, if you want to come, you're going to have to come summer semester. So I literally graduated high school. And the next week I was on a college campus,
Oh my.
moving into a dorm.
Oh my.
And so um, it was, but it was, again, it was life changing. I met people who were smarter than me, who thought differently, who looked differently, changed my worldview in a lot of different ways, met some lifelong friends, and that was the thing that you can't, I can never take that away and wouldn't want to. So Georgia Tech gave that to me. It also helped me, launch my own STEM story, right? Because I didn't know what STEM was. I didn't know what an engineer was. I didn't know. So I can so relate to your story on so many different levels. And yes, I think that statement that your mother made was pretty bold. Have you gone back and have you thanked her for it yet?
Yeah, I've had an opportunity to do a few interviews now.
Mm.
But she knows I call her my sunshine. So
Aw.
yeah, she's her faith is something that's unwavering, and so look, that was just the beginning, Dr. Tasha. There were many nights over here at Tech that I had to recall, like, you know what? I think we heard the Lord wrong. This is not for me, especially undergrad, right?
Right.
And I can't tell you what it felt like. I think people, when I returned from a PhD, one just never would have thought, and I don't know how many years, but it was like a mission that it needed to be proven. I
Mm.
was better than what that undergraduate experience. It was all these other climate factors, right? The environment, the people, like you said, the connections that allow that to be a thriving and transformative life. I'll be honest, the classrooms, that it was daunting and excruciating in
Yeah.
ways that probably drives a lot of the work I do now. I'll be honest. So when I came back, I was like, nah, this has to be a different looking system. And so when I got a 4.0 at graduate level, I was like, okay, maybe there's a different
I can do this. It's in
right?
here. It's in here. It's in here.
Yes, my mom had to talk me off the ledge. I don't know how many times doing undergrad. Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
no, it's same. I actually moved out of the dorm. True story. Moved out of the dorm, I want to say second semester freshman year, because my mother was like, look, girl, we did too much to get you there. And if you want to be on campus and you doing all this playing around, playing around, that's the way my mama said it. So you just gonna move home. And I was like, how's that gonna stop me from doing, but trust, where we lived at the time, where Georgia Tech was, and you had maybe kind of sort of had to share a car with somebody else, you weren't going nowhere.
See, now I needed that. I needed
So,
the involved, connected life. I think,
mhm.
especially early on, right? Until one gets their footing in this space, I think, especially if you're first gen, that connect that being around, like I said, people who you can go to the party, and then
Yeah,
at 2 o'clock we still study it. Like,
we
I tell people, I was like, that's a real thing here. It ain't that we didn't go to the party. But
No.
if 2 o'clock didn't mean we were gonna go back to sleep though, you might have to meet at the fourth floor of the library and inquire how to
Oh,
knock it out, right? You know,
oh, not the fourth floor of the library.
look,
That's a whole thing. We could do a whole
find a
episode.
spot, right? It was real, right? You know, and this
Yeah.
a few, it was only a few of us little double E's over there. Thank God for like your Archie Leckies.
Yes. I mean, but
Look, we
that's
were
true tea.
surviving. So yeah, I needed that. But I probably was a little bit more, you know, because Nesby, I did flat core, I was the RA, I was, you know, Pledge Delta Sigma Theta Sorority
Yeah.
Incorporated. And of course, you know, then I was stepmaster there, I was chaplain. So maybe a little more than what I should have. But I needed it, you know, in places like OMSA, you know, being a challenge counselor, pouring back. Um,
Yeah.
I wouldn't change any of that. While
No.
different GPA might have changed a few doors, the full development of that part of my STEM story to me is
It's
as
priceless.
essential as the curriculum. You know,
Yeah, I have to agree with that. I think the part that sometimes we get that gets lost in when we tell our STEM stories, because a lot of these STEM stories we have, like we could go a whole different place and talk about being the first and only, and being in a classroom where people think like you didn't deserve to be there. And all those things happen. Like True Tea, they're still happening, but we know firsthand what that experience is like, and having to live through that and persevere through that is a thing. So having Nesby and OMED and your sorority and just a network of friends who had your back on campus was it's everything. It's about you um, becoming more of who you are, and that's the thing that you remember the most, right? That's the thing that's so impactful. And it's actually the thing that keeps you there long past the A's, the B's, having to retake a couple of classes because, that happened too. So,
right? It's part of the persistence and retention formula. And it wasn't until, you know, you get on the other side, right? You understand the professional and the academic language around it, but it's network.
yeah, yeah,
Engineering, STEM life is all about networks. And if you don't have a strong network, one that serves your mentee needs, like that has to be designed within your system,
ooh,
your approach to this. It can't be just the class schedule. It can no, your network, that's of faculty, that's of staff, that's of students, that's of orgs, is in design. And the more intentional, as I tell students now, the more intentional you are about that, I promise you, it changes the trajectory. It is not just about intellectual aptitude.
yeah. And it's so funny we're talking about this. So my daughter is at UGA. I couldn't get her to go to tech. My husband is like, I had a full on, like, what do you mean you're not even going to apply to tech, all the things. But I was like, she's got to go where she feels the most comfortable. She walked on that campus and it was UGA from that point on. It just was, right? UGA was her thing. But now, COVID is sort of taken some things from her, in the sense that, like, I'm having to say to her, you need a network of people. Who are your friends? Who are your acquaintances? Who is it that you can call that has a connection to blah blah blah, and like things you want to do. Um, like right now we're looking for an internship. She's a psychology major and she's looking into clinical and criminal and school, like all of these different types of psychology. And it's like, well, who do you already know that's working in that space, that looks like you, that can help support you in your journey. And what's even funny about that is, like, my network is filled with those. So I'm like, okay, well, let me tap into my network and see what I can do for you, which is what happens. But at the same time, I'm like, you have to be intentional about developing that network for yourself. And that's a really key lesson that I don't think as an 18, 19-year-old, you really, really get and understand. Like, these people we know, we've known them since they were 18, 19 years old.
Or the thing you kind of help them to see is take a look around it, right? Look at look at the success networks, and it's true of every professional environment. You can say it's different. Merit plays. I mean, you got to show up and do your part. That's what I tell people. That ain't nothing handed out. You got to show up and do your part.
Right.
But no, that network matter. And my daughter, as you know, did go to Georgia Tech, right?
Right.
And she applied and was accepted, and I had no idea.
Mm,
Right?
mm,
The navigating of this, the operating of this, her scholarships, I didn't no idea about each. I was on an area that she ended up getting a scholarship about, Dr. Natasha. And this is the truth. I didn't know until she was like, oh yeah, like I'm being presented this award and scholarship. You want to go with me? And I was like, really? From who? And she named it. I was like, I'm in that, right? Like it's like women faculty. I was like, well, I guess it's good I didn't know because I would have had to cry conflict of interest, but I had no idea you even applied. I had nothing to do with the voting, but seriously. So to your point, and my circle of friends freshman year are still my strongest cohort. We're 30 years in.
right.
It makes a difference. It makes a difference of who they become. So you think of that whole return on investment, and I think that's the part we say mentoring a lot in STEM
Hmm.
stories. But I think about when I tell people, yeah, you build your network, and that's inclusive of faculty, of
Yeah.
staff, of peers, of mentors,
Ooh,
people of alum who look like you and who don't.
correct. Yes. I love that point. I need you to say that again for my listeners. I do, because that's
No,
the thing. I don't want people to miss it because that's such a good point.
no,
Let's say it again. Yeah.
well, and especially when you are a student of color, and let me just say, particularly from underrepresented minority backgrounds, you don't walk in with that network. Some people do, and to their point, their parents going to do it, et cetera. And thank goodness we're getting to second generation where we have parents who can use their network to leverage our students. But it's still new phenomena, right? Some of them they 3-4 generations in, right? Presidents have dinner with their grandparents. We don't. We have to cultivate that, and that's what's get us through. I talked about, first gen, low income student coming in. It's many times I met the Stingerette bus and getting to class on time at Tech was because it was the same bus driver from my house school that would make them those
Right.
supposed 2 stops for me, right?
Right.
The people who fed me in the student center, whether I had money or not, right?
Right.
That's part of that network, along with the faculty who you can come back later and ask for letters of recommendation for this scholarship or this work. And really the whole recommendation process is about networks, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's things like that we don't name that I think is really important for students and people to understand, that it's a part of it. You don't just get involved, and you don't just show up to the event. Sorry, I am on Tech Campus, and that's the whistle.
Love. That just brought back some memories. Love that. I am going to
Um,
actually leave this in the episode too.
yeah, now it's a tradition. Anyway, so I'll stop there. But this idea of a strong, multi-layered network that you begin to build along with your STEM story, because STEM just doesn't happen in isolation. Everything's a project team, and
Yeah.
thus everything's you can't name a field that's completely in isolation anymore.
Right. And I really like to tell people that STEM is everywhere. It's in every career, even those who people are like, no, I don't do anything, I don't do any of that. And I'm like, if you're using any piece of technology, if anything that's been engineered, like it's probably you have some, whether it's cursory or not, you have some level of STEM intelligence in there. And so there's not a one of us that can escape it. Um, what I want to do, I want to switch gears, well, not even switch gears, but I really want to talk about when you came back to get your PhD, what you got your PhD in, and how that translates to what you're doing now.
Okay. So I came back and got my PhD in sociology of technology and science. Once again, it was one of those hard decisions because I mentioned I did my MTS at Emory looking at religion and technology. And so I had actually two PhD offers covered to go in religious studies programs looking at the technological implications on religion and things like that. And for some reason, I reached out to, again, Dr. May, and wanted to inquire about a letter of recommendation, but I began to ask because it was new programs at Tech. And he was like, well, have you talked to Han Chao Lu? He's over in history and sociology and technology and science. I said, wait, what now? What area is that? What is that? Right? And anyway, had the conversation. And so, yeah, Georgia Tech offers a PhD in sociology of technology and science. And I was like, that's it, because it did something a lot of religious studies programs would not allow me to do. Technology changes rapidly. And I knew being in a technological institute, I can analyze, bring in, and do analytical work in juxtaposition with them much differently than if I had landed in one of those. And my interest really has always been around liberation, right? How technology serves liberation, how education can serve liberation, and how religion can serve liberation. So my passion has remained consistent regardless of the field. But I think being able to work in diverse fields have served me well. And so when I went into that, my dissertation was looking at knowledge production in 3D virtual worlds, right? Because those are all knowledge producing systems. How we educate is to produce knowledge a particular way, right? How we use technology in this communications is to produce information and knowledge a particular way, right? Particularly in the wireless industry that's growing so rapid, we're changing how knowledge and information is produced and distributed. And then the same thing for me about religion. A lot of people value core system. The knowledge they have of that sits in how that knowledge is produced through what gatekeepers, what mechanisms. And so I came in, I end up doing, so that was my initial thought. I knew from the beginning, I'm gonna bring together these three worlds, it's pulling together committee, and I started teaching. I, got a TA assignment because, PhD life when they paying for you. And I was always told you don't get a PhD if they're not going to pay for it. Because that says a lot about who wants you where. And so I was TAing, but I started doing these teaching courses in history and in social around civil rights movement and things like that. And so I end up working with Dr. Willie Pearson. And that split me off to do a parallel track. I'll be honest. I don't recommend this because the goal of your PhD is to go ahead and get done. Right. So my dissertation was on knowledge production in 3D virtual worlds, looking at that. However, I did a lot of work on STEM diversity with Dr. Pearson, right? Because that was the paid gig. That's where the research dollars was. That's where the TA assignment, that's what you did. And I ended up working with the National Academies on one of their research project about women in science and globally. And then that led to me looking at African Americans and their experience in engineering. And particularly starting kind of with Georgia Tech, that became my master's. I call it cultural trauma, the African American experience at Georgia Tech, building off Ron Ehrman's theory there, to be honest. And then went ahead and finished both. So my dissertation brought in an LMC, sociology of technology, and science and sociology of religion. You can imagine those committee conversations, but it was good because it required me to prove and to build, right? So I'm convincing experts that what I'm arguing is the expert of things. But that skill set became in handy to where I am now. And I'll say I left, and like most people thinking, okay, it's time. I'm gonna leave Atlanta. I'm gonna go get a postdoctorate. I was only looking at postdoc programs because I couldn't commit to more than 2 or 3 years outside of Atlanta. I was like, let me start there, turn this dissertation into a book or something, and then I'll come back and see what I really wanted to do. and thoughts around the professorate. But for me, I was like, I went into this wanting to make an impact. Like I said, for me, it was about liberation, right? And how
Right.
I use this thing. So I began to say the administrative side, I might could still do my research. Funny, I fell in love with research. I thought teaching, right? Education would be that, but I fell in love with research doing my PhD. I didn't think that would happen. And so I was like, I continue doing research. I can hopefully make the impact I want, right? In different ways, but taking the administrative route in academia may get me there. And so I changed, and I did some curriculum development and consulting work, to be honest, for about 2 years. Because of the TA and teaching along the way, it opened up paths, right? So I can
Right.
consult and finish and all of that. But I didn't want to work that hard on my own. I applaud you all to have your own businesses. My sit over there is ad hoc work. Like, I'm gonna work on this project. And by the way, I do have a business. I can do that and consult it, and and then no, I don't have to do that full time. But this position opened up. Andre Dickens actually was my predecessor as assistant director over here in OMED, and we all know where his political aspirations were
Yeah.
going. And when he left OMED, Erica called. It was like, so there's a position. And I was just like,
Oh my God, you sound
I'm
the
coming back to tech. Like, I just a full-time like job, like, She's like, well, just look into it. And when I did, I was just like, you know what, God, this is spot on. Let me at least apply. And yeah, it's a really long interview and processing, but I got the position, and then within 2 years, the director position opened up, and applied for that. And yeah, for a national search, in 7 rounds of interviews and talks, here I am. So I'm delighted to be
It
doing this
was
work.
meant. It was meant. I don't even recall where I was when I heard the news, but I think I did a little shout and a little shimmy dance when I heard. And I was like, oh man, like this is, yeah, I mean, again, it's one of those things where you don't even know what it's going to be. You just know it's going to be good.
Thank you. Look, the love from Georgia Tech alumni, I will say, I was just like, okay, so you really can't mess this up because way too many people like, oh man. And then within a year, the students, right? So between alumni and students, I was like, I don't know what's going to happen, but you can't mess this up. And then I'll be honest, I had to do a deep prayer about it because I couldn't go in here fearful. I couldn't
Yes.
come into this work fearful. And to be honest, again, I'm still that struggling undergrad. It was some fear at first, I think, of can I do this? Not whether or not I was qualified or equipped, but
Can I do this work? Yeah.
can I do it? And
Hmm.
yeah, so I think once I was like, yeah, if you're gonna do it though, you can't go in there fearful.
Right.
And so praise God, here I am.
I love it. And so for people who don't know, because Georgia Tech that's my place. So tell exactly what is OMED and what is it that you do there, and what does OMED do at Georgia Tech?
Wow. So OMED is the Office of Minority Educational Development at Georgia Tech. Is actually one of the oldest diversity units. I would say not even just at Tech, in many entities. I know diversity has become a little bit more of a buzz and things like that, but OMED's been doing this since 1979. It started with Challenge. So a lot of people hear about Challenge, but Challenge is um, a summer bridge program, but more so it's called Challenge for a reason. I think a lot of people think summer bridge is kind of, a soft transitioning into, and Challenge is the opposite of that.
For real. For real.
Challenge is a summer full course load of STEM only classes with a very supportive network though, but it's faculty, it's staff, it's workshop. It stresses you to take academic risk, and it's become even more so in recent years. It evolved to start offering tutoring, academic support, peer mentoring. Peer mentoring has become a bit, but OMED was doing what we used to call team coaches since the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
right? Partnering underrepresented minority students, particularly at PWIs, with an upperclassman that, outside the professional kind of gives you some tips, walks with you, right? Become that peer mentor along the way, which became a valuable practice and enterprise, I'll be honest. And now we've evolved to offer 11 different programs and initiatives. We serve Black, Latinx, multiracial, and Indigenous students. We serve all classifications and majors. We have academic, so we're an academic unit where we do curriculum and tutoring and advising and coaching, but we're also a cultural unit. We have the African American Male Initiative, we have the Women of Color Initiative, and we are also a professional development unit. So we have Career Alliance, our career pathway programs. We have Peerscope, and we are also launching a new transfer units. So we probably are one of the few of our kind, I would say, but for many places, we're home away from home for many students of color here at Georgia Tech.
Right. No, totally. I'll just say this. I loved OMED when I was on campus. I felt like that was the one place where I felt safe there, right? Just being in this, and not even wanting anything, just sort of walking into the building and having someone to talk to. And it's just like, shouldn't you be in class right now? One of those things, but like having someone to talk to and through stuff with meant everything. And OMED did that. They did that. So
I think, and during that era, you may be a little younger than I am, I believe. I'm not sure. But during that, early 90s era when it was all Georgia Tech alum, many of them who were current grad students, right, pushing OMED for us. So your Dr. Gavin Sams now, but Gavin Sams, right? Who's pushing in your S. Gordon Moore, Ray Hart, Cedric Starr, with people who invested because they knew that journey and they knew it well, right? So many of us, it was a time that most of OMED's professional staff were all Georgia Tech alum. And so that says a lot when you have those engineering, business, design, et cetera, majors who've come back, right? Some after careers, some stayed around straight through in academia, but investing in how things were developed. And so for me to come into this place, I inherited a strong mechanism, and then, definitely grateful for what I've been able to add and contribute in these last 2 years.
Well, I know that you'll continue to do that. And any person of color walking on Georgia Tech campus, please go find the OMED office and ask for Dr. Atwater. She's, but still, or at least her staff. I know they'll be welcoming, and it is the place you want to be and see all that they have to offer. They're more than just challenged. I think that's for many students, that's their first sort of foray into what all it offers, but it's the lifesaver you need on a campus that big, and one where the majority of the people don't look like you and they don't understand your struggles. That's a safe place for you. Okay. So if people are looking for you, and they will be looking for you after this interview, where can they find, what's coming up for you? Where can they find you? And just tell us all of those things.
So people find me, it seems easily around here. I don't know. In the digital era, I tell people I think I'm the only person with my name, Sybrina with a Y, Atwaters with an S. And so people find you pretty easily. But if you want to direct, if it is Georgia Tech related, and I would say this, I have to say this interview is not a Georgia Tech interview. We do have media requests for that. But if it is Georgia Tech related, you can definitely find me at sabrina.atwaters@omed.godtech.edu. And I encourage you definitely follow us on social media. We're on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, OMED GT or GT OMED. So depending on which one you are, you can find any of that. If it's, like I said, there's just so many interconnected things. I you know, we have a Women of Color collaborative in higher education now that is citywide, and the Woke website is out there under OMED. If you look under programs in Woke, you can get more information there. And if you're interested, is kind of in that area across the city of Atlanta, we would love to have more partners and people engage with that cohort. I still do some of my research consulting, but I'll be honest, I don't put that out much. But I do a lot of research design, right? A lot of people are looking at ways, how do we do STEM equity?
Mm.
You know, it's a buzz around, hey, we want to do diversity, equity, and inclusion work, but a lot of people don't know. And I'm a sociologist, I take a systems approach to that. I think it's a systemic issue. And so I help people look at from a systems level, right? What's going on with your organization or institution, and then how do you address the inequities that might have been there, right? That might have been overlooked, that may be in practices, policies, and procedures to create more equity income and outcomes, income, and so forth and so on. And that's via Aliyah Designs, but you also can find me on my personal website, LinkedIn, you know, the usual channels now, I guess. So definitely feel free to reach out.
All right. Okay, so thank you. So tell me this one last question. This is the question that we asked everyone that is a guest on the show. If you could travel back through time and talk to your younger self, what advice would you give her and why?
Yeah. You know what I would say to younger Sybrina is that she's enough.
Yeah.
You know, growing up, and again, you know, if Georgia was 49th on academic curriculum, then you know Murphy was pretty low within our system, right?
Right.
You know, it's so many ways people diminish you.
Mm-hmm.
And I would tell her, no, you're enough. You have enough faith. You're smart enough. You're skilled enough. You're strong enough. You have enough to obtain whatever goal, interest, passion, life that you desire. Your dreams are not too big. You don't have to diminish yourself or the vision God places in you, even when it gets hard or lonely or disappointing or unreciprocated, right? That some of your service you're giving, right, it won't be met with kindness or acceptance. And even if you fail, right, it all passes. Keep going. You are enough. Keep going. Hold your head high. Keep your faith strong. But you are enough. That's the message. If I could, I would just try to drill in her. It would have saved a lot of probably winding roads that could have been a little straighter, and not taking on some of the structures, systems, and practices that were meant to oppress, right?
Yeah.
Meant to push you out, meant to disregard. And yeah, I think that knowing you enough helps the persistence, but also well-being in the midst of. It's one thing to persist, right, and to survive. I think when you know what, yeah, I'm enough.
Yeah.
That you're able to thrive in difficulty in a different way, and that I have enough.
You know, the other part about knowing you're enough is that you can do it quietly. Like you don't need to. There's you know when to roar, and then you know when to walk silently.
Right.
Yeah.
You don't have to prove all the time.
No, you just
Because they'll
do.
make you feel like you do.
Still.
And I tell people, I'll end on this note. You know, people, I find myself not really wanting to use the language imposter syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
Because it makes it seem like it's a disease thing that cultivated completely internally. like it's just about what you think. I think there's too many structures, systems, barriers, historical practices that have shaped the very real felt impact of oppression and inequities and systemic racism and sexism upon people particularly pursuing STEM careers. So I don't think it's an impossible, like it's all in your hat. What I
Mm-mm.
do think though, what I do think is the way it does get adopted and becomes part of the self-regulation,
Yeah.
regulating of one's actions and choices and behaviors. That you can meet and confront. And the
Oh,
sooner you do that, the better.
I've got chills.
So
I've got
kind.
chills. Okay. Um, there's there's so much here. There's so much here. I really want to thank you, Dr. Atwaters, for just being immutable for us to even have this thing. Like, I mean, your process, your calendar is crazy, mine too. But we made a way to make this happen.
Thank you.
But I really want to take the time to just thank you for not just for this interview, but for like the work that you do, like the space that you hold, and your work, because it matters. And I really want you to know that even as go about, because you're not a person who roars. You do your work, um, but people notice, and I want you to know that. Like I'm here for it. You have a fan, you have a supporter, and anything you need from me on the record, off the record, on the record, anything you need from me, I am there for it. Uh,
Wow.
and,
Thank you so
and
much.
so I really want to, yeah, I want you to know that I just am so appreciative of you and the work that you're doing. It means a lot.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this opportunity, the platform. I I love it. This is my first podcast per se,
Oh,
right? Interviews normally look a little different. I love the name. And thank you for creating this platform, right? I had a chance to look at some of the stories and podcasts out there. Really appreciate it. I'm honored. I really am.
aw,
Because there's so many amazing people doing amazing things. So thank you very much for this invitation opportunity. And I'm excited about the impact and the outcomes of the work that I really am privileged to do. I get to work with amazing people all the time, and that includes amazing students and faculty, staff, and people in the community like yourself. So thank you very much.
awesome. Oh, thanks. All right, you guys. So this concludes the latest episode of Stimming in Stilettos. I know you're going to walk away with many good nuggets and probably goose pimples all over your skin from all of the nuggets that were dropped. And as I normally end every show, you guys keep yourself safe and be well.
Thank you.